What if I told you that the person you think you are doesn't actually exist? That every memory you treasure, every decision you believe you freely made, every emotion you claim as authentically yours? What if all of it was just a story your brain constructed to make sense of random neural firing? What if the self you defend, the identity you've built over decades, is nothing more than a convenient fiction? Right now, as you're hearing these words, thousands of unconscious processes are determining your reactions. Your pupils are dilating or contracting based on emotional responses you're not aware of. Your brain is filtering out 99% of sensory data before it ever reaches your conscious mind. Neurotransmitters are flooding your synapses, creating feelings you'll later rationalize as choices. You think you're in control. You think you're the author of your life's narrative. But what if you're not the writer? You're just the reader, discovering the plot as it unfolds. Philosophy isn't just abstract contemplation in dusty libraries. It's the surgical knife that cuts through the comfortable illusions we wrap around ourselves like security blankets. And once you see through these illusions, you can never unsee them. Your relationships change. Your career choices transform. The way you experience a single ordinary Tuesday morning becomes fundamentally different. Over the next several minutes, we're going to explore 75 philosophical concepts that don't just challenge how you think. They restructure the architecture of your perception itself. Some will make you uncomfortable. Others will feel like finally putting on glasses after years of blurred vision. A few might genuinely disturb the foundations of beliefs you've held your entire life. We'll journey from ancient Buddhist insights about the nature of self, through European existentialist revelations about freedom and responsibility, into modern philosophical investigations of consciousness and meaning. We'll examine why you suffer, why you desire, why you fear death, and why none of it might mean what you think it means. This isn't philosophy as intellectual exercise. This is philosophy as experiential transformation. So take a breath, settle in, and prepare to question everything you thought you knew about the person living inside your head. Let's begin. The concept of Anatta, no-self. Close your eyes for a moment and try to locate your self. Where is it, exactly? Is it in your thoughts? But thoughts constantly change. They arise and disappear like waves. Is it in your body? But every cell in your body replaces itself over time. The physical you from 7 years ago is literally gone. Is it in your memories? But neuroscience shows memories are reconstructed each time you access them, changing slightly with every recall. The Buddhist concept of anatta, often translated as no-self, suggests that what we call the self is actually a collection of constantly changing processes with no fixed, permanent core. You're not a thing, you're a verb. Not a noun but a continuous flow of experience. Think about a river. We say, the Mississippi River, as if it's a single, stable entity. But the water flowing through it changes every microsecond. The riverbed shifts. The river in 1823 isn't the same river in 2025 except in name and general location. Yet we grant it identity, permanence, thingness. You are that river. And the existential panic you might be feeling right now? That's the ego, the constructed sense of self, defending its own existence. The Ship of Theseus paradox. The ancient Greeks asked, if you replace every plank of a ship, one by one, until no original material remains, is it still the same ship? And if you then take all the old planks and reconstruct them into a ship, which one is the real Ship of Theseus? You face this paradox every day. Your cells die and regenerate. Your beliefs evolve. Your personality shifts with circumstances, relationships, and brain chemistry. The you at age 7 held different beliefs, different knowledge, different personality traits than the you today. So which one is the real you? Some philosophers argue identity is about continuity of consciousness, an unbroken stream of experience connecting past to present. But here's where it gets disturbing. What if that stream isn't as continuous as you think? The illusion of continuous consciousness. Every night when you fall into deep sleep, your conscious experience essentially ceases. There's no you experiencing the passage of time. Hours pass in what feels like seconds. You're effectively dead to the world, and then you resurrect each morning. How do you know you're the same person who fell asleep? You have memories, sure. But the philosopher Derek Parfit pointed out that having memories and being the person who formed those memories are two different things. You could be a completely new consciousness that came into existence this morning, equipped with a previous person's memories, and you'd never know the difference. Think about that for a second. Really let it sink in. You cannot prove you're the same consciousness that existed yesterday. You just assume continuity because the alternative is terrifying. The homunculus fallacy. When you think about you experiencing your life, you probably imagine a little person sitting in your head, watching the world through your eyes like someone in a control room. Neuroscientists call this the homunculus fallacy, the assumption that there's a centralized experiencer receiving and processing information. But brain imaging reveals no such command center. Consciousness emerges from distributed networks firing in coordination. There's no you watching the show, there's just the show itself, creating the illusion of a watcher. The philosopher Thomas Metzinger argues we're ego machines, systems that create a self-model for evolutionary advantage, then mistake the model for reality. Your brain generates a unified sense of self because fragmented consciousness wouldn't survive long in dangerous environments. The self is a user interface, not the actual program running underneath. Practical implications: living without a fixed self. So what happens when you truly absorb this? When you stop clinging to a fixed identity? Imagine someone insults you. Normally, you'd take it personally. They attacked you, your essential self. But if you recognize that the you they're addressing is just a temporary constellation of thoughts, emotions, and social roles, the insult loses its sting. It's like getting angry at someone for insulting a character you played in a school play. Sure, you wore the costume, but it wasn't actually you. This isn't about becoming passive or detached. It's about recognizing the fluidity of identity. You can be fiercely committed to values and goals while simultaneously holding lightly to fixed notions of who you must be. The self is like water. It takes the shape of whatever container it's poured into. Understanding this brings profound freedom. You're not trapped by past versions of yourself. The person who failed, who made terrible choices, who hurt others, that person was real at the time, but they're not who you are right now. And who you are right now isn't who you'll be in 5 years. The shadow side. But here's the dark edge of this realization. If there's no fixed self, then who's responsible for your actions? If you're just a flow of changing states, can you really be held accountable for past behavior? This is where Eastern philosophy diverges from its Western appropriation. Buddhism pairs the concept of no-self with karma, the idea that actions have consequences that flow through the stream of consciousness even if there's no fixed self experiencing them. You're not the same person who acted, but you inherit the consequences of their actions because you're part of the same causal chain. The self might be an illusion, but suffering is real. Consequences are real. And the responsibility to reduce suffering, yours and others, remains real even when the who carrying that responsibility is recognized as fluid and constructed. You are not who you think you are. But you're also not nothing. You're the space where consciousness is currently happening, and that's enough. Schopenhauer's will to live. The 19th century philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer had a cheerful message for humanity. Life is suffering, and it's all because of an insatiable, blind force he called the will to live. Imagine you're thirsty. You drink water. Relief washes over you for about 30 seconds. Then the cycle begins again. Hunger. Eat. Relief. Hunger. Desire. Satisfaction. Desire. On and on until you die. Schopenhauer argued that beneath all conscious thought, beneath personality and reason, there's a fundamental drive, a will, that propels all living things toward survival, reproduction, and perpetuation. This will doesn't care about your happiness. It just wants to continue existing, using your body and mind as temporary vehicles. Every desire you feel, for food, sex, status, meaning, is the will manipulating you into serving its purposes. And here's the cruel joke. Satisfaction is always temporary. The moment you fulfill one desire, a new one emerges. You're a hamster on a wheel, running frantically toward contentment that evaporates the instant you reach it. You think you want that promotion, that relationship, that house. But what you really want is to stop wanting. And that's the one thing the will to live will never grant you. The Hedonic Treadmill. Modern psychology validated Schopenhauer's insight with research on the hedonic treadmill. Studies show that lottery winners return to their baseline happiness levels within months. People who become paralyzed experience a similar return to baseline after initial adjustment. Your brain isn't designed to be satisfied, it's designed to seek. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter most associated with pleasure, actually spikes during the anticipation of reward, not during the reward itself. The hunt feels better than the feast. The pursuit of happiness is biochemically more rewarding than happiness itself. This is why you scroll endlessly through social media, why you can't stop checking emails, why you buy things that sit unused in closets. You're not seeking satisfaction, you're seeking the hit of anticipation that comes from seeking satisfaction. The treadmill keeps you running because standing still feels like death. But running gets you nowhere. The second noble truth, tanha, craving. Buddhism identified this problem 2,500 years before neuroscience confirmed it. The second noble truth states that suffering, dukkha, arises from tanha, typically translated as craving, thirst, or desire. But it's more subtle than just wanting things. Tanha has three forms. Craving for sensory pleasure, the obvious one. Food, sex, comfort, stimulation. Craving for existence, the desperate need for your life to continue, for your identity to persist, for your projects to matter. Craving for non-existence, the wish to escape, to stop feeling pain, to end unpleasant experiences. Notice something? You can't win. If you crave pleasure, you suffer when it ends. If you crave existence, you suffer from the fear of death. If you crave non-existence, you suffer from the pain of living. The Buddha's radical claim wasn't that you should fulfill your desires better or find the right desires. It was that the structure of desire itself is the problem. As long as you're in a relationship of craving with experience, wanting it to be different than it is, you suffer. Sartre's bad faith and inauthentic desire. But what if your desires aren't even your own? Jean-Paul Sartre introduced the concept of bad faith, self-deception about your own freedom. You tell yourself you have to work this job, maintain this relationship, live this way. You've convinced yourself your choices are determined by external circumstances, family expectations, or social norms. But Sartre's uncomfortable truth is this: you're radically free. You're choosing your imprisonment. You're choosing to value others' opinions. You're choosing to pursue desires that society implanted in you. Watch how this plays out. You want an expensive car. But why? Is it the car itself, or the status it signals? Is it because you genuinely love automotive engineering, or because you've internalized a cultural narrative that says success equals luxury? Most people never ask these questions. They pursue desires they've adopted from advertising, peer pressure, and social conditioning, then wonder why achieving goals feels hollow. You're playing a role in a script you didn't write, pursuing desires that aren't authentically yours, and calling it your life. The paradox of choice. Here's where modern psychology adds another twist. Even when you try to choose authentically, you're paralyzed by options. Barry Schwartz's research on the paradox of choice reveals that more options lead to less satisfaction. When you have 30 varieties of jam to choose from, you're less likely to buy any, and if you do buy, you're less satisfied than if you'd only had 3 options. Why? Because with abundant choice comes abundant responsibility. You can't blame external constraints for your dissatisfaction. You chose this. And you're haunted by the road not taken. Every choice carries the weight of all unchosen alternatives. You wanted freedom from predetermined life scripts. But freedom without guidance feels like drowning in infinite possibility, where every choice is both crucial and meaningless. Practical implications. Breaking the cycle. So you're driven by biological imperatives you didn't choose, pursuing desires implanted by society, suffering from both lack and attainment, paralyzed by too much freedom, and trapped by the fundamental structure of wanting itself. What's the way out? Buddhism suggests the path of non-attachment, not suppressing desire, but recognizing its nature and loosening its grip. When you want something, notice the wanting. Feel the physical sensation of desire without immediately acting on it. Create space between impulse and response. Schopenhauer recommended aesthetic contemplation and compassion, moments when you temporarily escape the will's tyranny by losing yourself in beauty or connection. Existentialists like Sartre urge radical honesty about your freedom. Own your choices completely. Stop pretending you're a victim of circumstance. Even choosing to stay in unpleasant situations is a choice. Own it or change it. But here's what none of them fully solve. The problem might not have a solution. The architecture of human consciousness might simply include suffering as a core feature, not a bug. Maybe the point isn't to escape suffering but to suffer consciously, honestly, for things that genuinely matter to you rather than for scripts others wrote. The treadmill keeps running. But you can choose what you're running toward, even if you never arrive. Sartre's The Gaze, Le Regard. Imagine you're alone in your apartment, dancing ridiculously to music, completely unself-conscious. Your movements are free, spontaneous, authentic. Then you notice a neighbor watching through the window. Instantly, everything changes. You're no longer a free subject moving through space. You've become an object in someone else's consciousness. Sartre called this transformation the gaze, le regard. The moment someone observes you, you're frozen, categorized, judged. You become a thing with fixed properties in their perception, weird, embarrassing, foolish. But here's the truly disturbing part, you internalize their gaze. Even after they look away, even when you're alone again, you carry the observer inside you. You've learned to see yourself through others' eyes, and now you can never dance quite as freely again. The gaze doesn't just judge you, it creates you. Your sense of self is largely constructed from accumulated observations and judgments from others. You're not discovering who you are, you're assembling an identity from reflected appraisals, like building a picture from shattered mirror fragments. Heidegger's Das Man, the They. Martin Heidegger identified another layer to this trap. Das Man, often translated as the They or the One. One doesn't do that. One should pursue a stable career. One gets married by 30. This anonymous one isn't anyone specific. It's the voice of collective social expectation, the average understanding, the comfortable middle path of conventional wisdom. And it's everywhere, shaping your choices through invisible pressure. You choose your career not because you're passionate about it, but because it's what one does. You present yourself in certain ways because it's what one expects. You hide parts of yourself that don't fit what one finds acceptable. Heidegger argued that most people live their entire lives in this mode of Das Man, never accessing authentic existence. You're not living your life, you're living the average life, the socially acceptable life, the life that makes others comfortable. The truly radical question isn't, what do I want? It's, which of these wants are actually mine, and which are borrowed from the they? Authenticity versus bad faith. Authenticity doesn't mean being yourself in the Instagram self-actualization sense. It means fully accepting your freedom and responsibility, even when that freedom is terrifying. Most people practice bad faith, systematic self-deception about their freedom. Examples are everywhere. The person who says, I have to stay in this marriage for the kids, while choosing to stay in the marriage for the kids. The worker who says, I have no choice but to accept these conditions, while choosing not to risk job loss. The student who says, my parents forced me into this major, while choosing to prioritize parental approval over authentic interest. Bad faith is comfortable because it absolves you of responsibility. If you're determined by circumstances, you can't be blamed for your life. But the cost is enormous. You become a ghost in your own existence, a puppet acting out scripts written by others. Authenticity is uncomfortable because it demands you acknowledge that you're choosing your life, including its constraints. You're choosing to value security over risk. You're choosing to prioritize others' comfort over your own truth. You're choosing fear over courage. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. Every moment becomes a choice, and every choice reveals who you're becoming. The performance of self. Erving Goffman's sociological work adds another dimension. All social interaction is performance. You're constantly engaging in impression management, adjusting your presentation based on your audience. You have a work self, a family self, a friend group self, an online self. Each is a performance calibrated for its specific audience. And if you're honest, you'll notice that none of them quite captures something you sense as your real self, if such a thing even exists. The exhaustion you feel after social interactions isn't just about energy, it's about maintaining performances. You're constantly monitoring yourself, adjusting, ensuring the character you're playing remains believable and acceptable. But here's the philosophical vertigo. If all you ever do is perform different versions of self for different audiences, which one is real? Maybe they all are. Maybe none are. Maybe the authentic self beneath the performances is just another performance, the performance of authenticity itself. The paradox of authenticity. Here's where it gets truly confusing. The more you strive for authenticity, the more you might be performing authenticity for yourself and others. You meet someone who's aggressively real and unfiltered. They pride themselves on brutal honesty, on rejecting social niceties, on telling it like it is. But isn't this just another performance? The performance of the authentic person, carefully curated to signal independence and honesty? True authenticity might be impossible because the moment you become conscious of trying to be authentic, you're already in performance mode, playing the role of the authentic person. Some philosophers argue authenticity isn't about finding a true self, but about honestly acknowledging the groundlessness of all self-construction. You're not discovering who you really are. You're choosing who to become, moment by moment, knowing that choice is both free and constrained, both meaningful and arbitrary. Living under the gaze. So how do you live, knowing all this? One approach: recognize the gaze but refuse to let it define you completely. Be aware that others observe and judge you, but treat their judgments as data rather than truth. Someone thinks you're foolish? That's information about them, their values, their perspective, not objective truth about you. Another approach: consciously choose which performances serve your values. You'll always be performing to some degree, but you can perform roles aligned with who you're trying to become rather than roles designed to win approval. A third approach: develop what the Stoics called indifference to externals. Others' opinions are outside your control. Your choices are within it. Pour your energy into what you can actually affect. But perhaps the most honest response is to sit with the discomfort of never quite knowing whether you're being authentic or performing authenticity, whether your choices are truly free or subtly coerced, whether the self you're protecting even exists. The gaze is inescapable, but awareness of it, truly metabolizing the fact that you construct your identity from others' reflections, can paradoxically grant you more freedom. Not complete freedom, but enough to matter. You're being watched. You're watching yourself being watched. And somewhere in that hall of mirrors is something that might, just might, be you. Camus and the absurd. Albert Camus opened his philosophical essay with this cheerful line: "There is only one really serious philosophical question, and that is suicide." Not because he was advocating it, but because he recognized the fundamental question beneath all philosophy. Why continue existing in a universe that offers no inherent meaning? Camus called this the absurd, the confrontation between human need for meaning and the universe's silent indifference to that need. You want your life to matter. You want your suffering to serve a purpose. You want the universe to care whether you exist. It doesn't. Imagine shouting questions into the void and receiving only echoes of your own voice. That's the human condition. We're meaning-making machines trapped in a cosmos that generates no meaning, value-seeking creatures in a value-neutral universe. You can't think your way out of the absurd because it's not an intellectual problem, it's an existential condition. No amount of philosophy, science, or religion eliminates the gap between your hunger for significance and reality's indifference. So what do you do? Camus rejected suicide, both literal suicide and what he called philosophical suicide, escaping into religious or ideological systems that promise false certainty. Instead, he advocated rebellion and acceptance. One must imagine Sisyphus happy, he wrote, referencing the Greek myth of a man condemned to roll a boulder uphill for eternity, only to watch it roll back down each time. Sisyphus's punishment is meaningless repetition. But Camus suggests that in fully accepting the absurdity of his task, Sisyphus can find a kind of freedom. The struggle itself, undertaken with open eyes and defiant acceptance, becomes enough. Your life might be objectively meaningless, but it's your meaningless life, and you can fill it with whatever subjective meaning you choose to create. Nietzsche's death of God. God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him. Nietzsche's famous pronouncement wasn't celebrating atheism, it was diagnosing a cultural crisis. For millennia, religious frameworks provided ready-made meaning. Your suffering had purpose, divine plan. Your actions had significance, moral cosmic importance. Your existence mattered, you were created by God for a reason. But as modernity eroded religious certainty, those scaffolds of meaning collapsed. And most people didn't realize what they'd lost until they were standing on nothing. Without God, or any transcendent meaning source, you face what Nietzsche called nihilism, the devaluation of all values, the recognition that nothing matters objectively. Many respond to this by desperately clinging to substitute religions, political ideologies that promise salvation, consumer culture that offers identity through purchases, social media that provides the illusion of significance through likes and shares. But Nietzsche saw nihilism not as the end, but as a clearing of ground for something new. He proposed the Übermensch, Overman, not a superhero, but a human who creates their own values without need for external validation or transcendent justification. This is terrifying freedom. You can't defer to God's will, natural law, cosmic purpose, or social convention. You must author your own values, knowing they're groundless, and commit to them anyway. Most people never take up this challenge. They live what Nietzsche called last man existence, comfortable, unchallenging, asking for nothing but security and mild pleasure, never risking themselves on the creation of genuine values. Viktor Frankl and the will to meaning. Viktor Frankl survived Nazi concentration camps and emerged with a crucial insight. Those who survived weren't necessarily the strongest or healthiest. They were those who maintained a sense of meaning, something to live for. Frankl argued that Freud was wrong to reduce human motivation to pleasure, the pleasure principle, and Adler was wrong to reduce it to power. The fundamental human drive is the search for meaning. But here's his radical claim. Meaning isn't found, it's created through three pathways. Creating work or doing a deed, contribution, achievement, building something, experiencing something or encountering someone, love, beauty, connection. The attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering, how we choose to bear the unbearable. That third path is crucial. You can't always control what happens to you. You can't eliminate suffering from existence. But you can choose what your suffering means. You can transform meaningless pain into meaningful struggle by committing it to a purpose larger than yourself. Frankl witnessed fellow prisoners who maintained dignity, helped others, and found meaning even in the camps, not because the camps were meaningful, but because they chose to act meaningfully within them. Existential responsibility. Here's where all these threads converge into an uncomfortable truth. If there's no inherent meaning, then you're radically responsible for creating your own. You can't blame God, fate, society, or circumstances for the meaninglessness of your existence. You're the author, and you're writing the story in real time. This means your current life, the one you might find boring, frustrating, or empty, is something you're actively choosing. Not in the sense that you chose your birth circumstances or traumas, but in the sense that you're choosing how to respond to them, what narrative to construct around them, what meaning to extract from them. Feel the weight of that. Right now, this moment, you're deciding what your life means. And tomorrow you'll decide again. And the day after. Every day until you die, you're authoring significance or defaulting to nihilism. Most people never consciously make this choice. They drift through life adopting meanings from culture, religion, advertising, peer groups, never quite feeling that anything deeply matters because they never took responsibility for making it matter. The meaning crisis. Modern society faces what philosopher John Verveek calls the meaning crisis. Traditional structures that provided significance, religion, community, clear life stages and roles have eroded. We're wealthier, safer, and more comfortable than any previous generation, yet reports of meaninglessness, depression, and existential emptiness skyrocket. Why? Because meaning doesn't emerge from comfort. It emerges from commitment to something beyond yourself, from struggle toward chosen values, from connection to others and projects that will outlast you. You're scrolling through infinite content, pursuing endless small pleasures, drowning in options, free from suffering in ways that would astound your ancestors, and utterly empty. Practical creation of meaning. So how do you create meaning in a meaningless universe? First, abandon the search for cosmic, objective meaning. You won't find it because it doesn't exist. The universe is indifferent. Accept this fully. Second, recognize that subjective meaning is still meaning. The fact that your values are constructed rather than discovered doesn't make them less powerful. A painting doesn't need to exist objectively to move you. Love doesn't need cosmic significance to feel real. Third, commit to something beyond yourself. Meaning emerges at the boundary between self and other, a cause, a community, a creative work, a set of values. Pour yourself into something that will outlast you. Fourth, embrace the struggle. Camus was right. The meaning isn't in achieving the goal, it's in the defiant commitment to pushing the boulder uphill, knowing it will roll back, and pushing again anyway. Your life means exactly what you decide it means, for exactly as long as you maintain that commitment. No more, no less, and that's enough. Heidegger's being toward death. You're going to die, not in some vague, distant, abstract way. Actually die. Your consciousness will cease. Your projects will end. Your relationships will be severed by your permanent absence. Everything you've built, learned, and experienced will vanish with you. Heidegger argued that most people live in denial of this fact. They know intellectually that death is inevitable, but they don't live with that knowledge. Instead, they exist in what he called inauthentic mode, treating death as something that happens to others, an event perpetually in the future, abstract rather than personal. But authentic existence requires living as being toward death, organizing your life with full awareness of your finitude. This isn't morbid obsession, it's using mortality as a clarifying lens. When you truly accept that you have limited time, trivialities fall away. You stop caring as much about impressing strangers. You stop postponing important conversations. You become fiercely protective of your attention and energy because you recognize their scarcity. Death isn't just an event that ends your life, it's the horizon that gives your life shape and urgency. Remove death, and everything loses weight. If you had infinite time, nothing would matter because you could always do it later. Your mortality is what makes your choices meaningful. The terror of temporal finitude. But there's a darker edge to this realization. Right now, as you're reading this, seconds are vanishing irretrievably. You're spending your life, literally spending the substance of your existence, on this activity. Is it worth it? Is anything worth it? You have approximately 4,000 weeks if you live to 80. You've already spent many of them. How many remain? And what are you doing with them? Every choice to spend time one way is simultaneously a choice not to spend it another way. Every yes contains infinite numbers. You can't visit every country, read every book, form every relationship, master every skill. You have to choose, and your choices eliminate whole galaxies of possibility. This is the terror of temporal finitude, not just that you'll die eventually, but that you're dying right now, moment by moment, and most of your life will be spent on things you'll barely remember. Epicurus on death. The ancient philosopher Epicurus offered a curious comfort. Death is nothing to us. When we exist, death is not yet present, and when death is present, we no longer exist. You'll never experience being dead. By definition, death is the absence of experience. So why fear something you'll never encounter? But this rationalization, while logically sound, rarely dissolves the fear. Because the fear isn't really about the experience of death, it's about non-existence itself, the permanent loss of everything you are and have. Your ego, the constructed self we discussed earlier, rebels against its own erasure. It wants to persist, to matter beyond its brief window of existence. This is why humans build monuments, have children, create art, seek fame. We're all desperately trying to extend our significance beyond our mortality. The denial of death. Anthropologist Ernest Becker argued that virtually all human behavior is organized around denying or transcending death. Culture itself is a collective denial of death project, symbolic systems that promise immortality through legacy, heaven, historical impact, genetic continuation. You pursue career success not just for material comfort but to create something that outlasts you. You have children partly to extend yourself into the future. You seek meaning because a meaningful life feels like it transcends mere biological extinction. But no matter how much you achieve, create, or contribute, you, the specific consciousness reading these words, will be extinguished. Your first-person experience of reality will vanish completely and permanently. And the universe will continue as if you never existed. Buddhist impermanence, Anicca. Buddhism addresses mortality through the lens of Anicca, impermanence. Everything that arises passes away. Every moment, every thought, every relationship, every civilization is temporary. You're not just mortal, you're composed entirely of impermanent processes. Your cells die and regenerate. Your thoughts arise and dissolve. Your relationships form and end. The person you were a decade ago has already died. You just didn't notice because the transition was gradual. Resistance to this impermanence is what causes suffering. You cling to experiences, relationships, and youth, trying to make permanent what is inherently temporary. It's like trying to hold water in your fist. The tighter you grip, the faster it escapes. The Buddhist path suggests making peace with impermanence rather than fighting it. Appreciate the sunset because it's fleeting. Love people intensely because they'll die. Savor experiences knowing they'll never return exactly as they are. This isn't pessimism, it's realism that paradoxically intensifies life. When you fully accept that everything ends, including you, each moment becomes precious precisely because it's unrepeatable. The liberation of mortality. Here's a strange inversion. Your mortality might be the most liberating fact about your existence. If nothing ultimately matters, if the universe doesn't care and everything ends, then you're free to make anything matter. You're not discovering importance, you're assigning it. And since you're going to die anyway, you might as well pursue what genuinely matters to you rather than what impresses others or conforms to expectations. Your mortality eliminates the ultimate consequences. Embarrass yourself? You'll die soon anyway. Fail at a project. Death awaits regardless. Take a risk that doesn't pay off? It's all temporary anyway. This isn't nihilism, it's the foundation of radical freedom. The impermanence that seems so tragic from one angle becomes liberation from another. Time perception and presence. But here's a practical problem. You can't live constantly aware of mortality. That level of existential intensity would be exhausting and paralyzing. So you oscillate between forgetfulness and awareness, between getting lost in daily trivialities and snapping back to mortal urgency. This oscillation is normal and necessary. The practice is to increase the frequency of awareness without becoming obsessive. Periodically remember, you're dying. This very day is part of your limited allocation. Are you spending it in ways aligned with your deepest values? Philosophy offers tools for this. Stoic memento mori, remember you must die. Buddhist death meditations, existentialist authenticity practice. The goal isn't to be morbidly fixated on death, but to use mortality as a lens that brings life into focus. The weight of existence. Ultimately, time, and mortality reveal what Heidegger called the weight of existence. Your life isn't a dress rehearsal. This is it. The only consciousness you'll ever have, the only chance to experience reality, the brief window of existence before eternal non-existence. That weight can crush you with despair or galvanize you with purpose. The difference lies in whether you accept it honestly or flee into distractions that postpone the confrontation. Your mortality isn't a problem to solve. It's the condition that makes solving any problem worthwhile. You have limited time. What will you do with it? The philosophy trap. Here's an uncomfortable paradox. Understanding these philosophical concepts can become its own form of escapism. You can spend years reading philosophy, discussing ontology and epistemology, deconstructing the self and reconstructing meaning, and use all of it to avoid actually living authentically, confronting your mortality, or taking responsibility for your choices. Philosophy isn't meant to be an intellectual game. These aren't puzzles to solve for the pleasure of solving them. They're frameworks for transforming how you exist in the world. So the question isn't, do I understand no-self? It's, has my understanding of no-self changed how I react when someone criticizes me? The question isn't, do I grasp the absurd? It's, am I living with the defiant acceptance Camus described, or am I fleeing into comfortable illusions? Living the ideas. Let's get practical. How do these 75 concepts, we've touched on about 20 major ones, with dozens more implied in the connections, actually change your Tuesday morning? On self, you check social media and feel a spike of anxiety about your image. Instead of being overwhelmed, you recognize the constructed nature of both your self-image and the selves you're comparing yourself to. The anxiety doesn't vanish, but it loosens. You see it as brain activity, not truth about your worth. On desire, you feel intense craving for something, a purchase, a relationship, achievement. You pause and ask, is this my desire or something I've adopted from the they? Will obtaining this end the wanting, or just shift it to the next thing? You might still pursue it, but consciously, as a choice rather than compulsion. On authenticity, you're in a conversation and notice yourself performing, calibrating your opinions to be likable, suppressing genuine reactions, playing a role. You can't stop performing entirely, but awareness creates a gap. In that gap, you can sometimes choose more honest responses, can risk being disliked for authentic expression. On meaning, you're doing something tedious, commuting, doing chores, answering emails. The old pattern is to endure it as meaningless time between meaningful moments. The new pattern recognizes that this moment is your life. Not preparation for life. Actual life, happening now. You can invest it with attention, treating the mundane as the sacred ordinary it actually is. On mortality, you're about to spend 3 hours scrolling or binge-watching something you don't even care about. You remember, this is 3 hours of your finite existence. Do you really want to spend your life, the only consciousness you'll ever have, this way? Sometimes the answer is yes, rest is legitimate. But often it changes the choice. The integration challenge. The real challenge isn't understanding these ideas, it's metabolizing them so deeply that they become operational, changing your default responses rather than just providing intellectual concepts you occasionally remember. This requires practice. Not academic study, but experiential practice. Mindfulness meditation to observe the constructed, impermanent nature of self and experience. Memento mori reminders to keep mortality present without becoming morbid. Authentic choice audits where you regularly examine which of your desires and choices are truly yours. Absurdist acceptance practices where you sit with meaninglessness without fleeing into false comfort. Compassionate awareness of others' constructed selves, recognizing they're also navigating the same existential challenges. The transformation timeline. Understanding comes quickly. Insight can strike in moments, but transformation is gradual. You'll cycle through phases. Intellectual understanding, I get it conceptually. Glimpses, moments where you really feel the truth of it. Inconsistent application, sometimes remembering, often forgetting. Growing integration, The ideas become more default, less effortful to access. Embodied wisdom. The concepts disappear into changed ways of being. Most people stay at level 1, treating philosophy as interesting information. Some reach level 2, experiencing occasional insights that fade. Few persist to levels 4 to 5, where the ideas fundamentally restructure perception and behavior. The difference between levels is practice and confrontation. You have to bring these ideas into direct contact with your actual life, your actual fears, your actual choices. Not in the abstract, but specifically, personally, uncomfortably. The ongoing practice. These aren't ideas you master once and then possess. They're perspectives you must continually refresh because the default human condition is forgetting. Falling back into illusions of fixed self, permanent satisfaction, cosmic meaning, and infinite time. You'll forget you're mortal and need reminding. You'll cling to a constructed identity and need to release it again. You'll mistake the gaze for truth and need to reclaim your freedom repeatedly. This isn't failure, it's the nature of the practice. Philosophy isn't a destination where you arrive fully enlightened. It's a continuous practice of waking up from comfortable illusions, over and over, each time seeing a bit more clearly. The question isn't whether you'll understand these ideas. It's whether you'll live them. Lasting resonance. The 75th idea. We've journeyed through concepts of self, suffering, freedom, meaning, and mortality. But there's one final philosophical idea that encompasses all the others. You can know all of this and still forget it in the next moment. Wisdom isn't about accumulating insights. It's about returning to them when you've inevitably lost them. The wisest people aren't those who never forget. They're those who notice they've forgotten and find their way back. Right now, you're probably feeling some mixture of inspiration, discomfort, and overwhelm. Parts of this resonated deeply. Parts triggered resistance. Some ideas illuminated your experience while others seemed abstract or inaccessible. All of that is perfect. Philosophy should disturb your comfortable patterns while offering tools for navigating the disturbance. What changes? If you truly absorb these concepts, not just intellectually but experientially, certain things will change. You'll take yourself less seriously while taking your choices more seriously. You'll care less about what others think while caring more deeply about authentic connection. You'll accept meaninglessness while creating fierce commitment to self-chosen values. You'll feel your mortality more acutely while experiencing life more fully because of it. You'll recognize suffering as inherent while suffering less from your suffering. Paradoxes, all of them. But human existence is paradoxical, simultaneously free and constrained, meaningful and absurd, terrifying and beautiful. The invitation. These aren't just ideas to consider. They're invitations to experiential investigation. Test them against your actual life. When anxiety arises, examine whether it's protecting a constructed self. When desire grips you, observe whether satisfaction brings lasting peace. When you perform for others, notice the gaze and what it costs you. When meaninglessness threatens, recognize your freedom to create meaning. When you forget your mortality, remember, and let that remembering clarify what matters. Philosophy isn't spectator sport. It's full contact, experiential transformation. The final question. You've reached the end of this exploration. But philosophy isn't a journey with endpoints, it's a continuing inquiry. So here's the question you'll carry forward. Now that you know all this, now that you've seen through the illusions of fixed self, permanent satisfaction, external authority, cosmic meaning, and unlimited time, what will you do differently? Not theoretically. Not eventually. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up as a constructed self with finite time in an indifferent universe, free to create meaning from nothing, observed by others and observing yourself, how will you live?